All right, we're going to look here at part two of the Roaring Twenties, and a lot of this will be kind of rehashing what we've already got to. We'll try to get through it pretty quick here. So the idea here, right, of traditionalism, the belief that usually the best way to keep things the way they are, versus modernism, the belief that new ways are the better ways of doing things. Sometimes you'll see refer to this as the cult of the new. So, as I was saying last time before I decided I'll cut it off there, um, they lived in rural areas, right? Traditionalists did, and thought religion and modern people were backward, or religion was great, modern people were backwards, viewed material culture, as it says, and new technology as damaging to society, was pro prohibition and against jazz. Modernists, right, are the counterpoint to that. They saw technology and science as representing progress, right? Were sort of anti-religion, disliked prohibition, liked jazz, all that sort of stuff. So we're going to see the advent of the car, right? Because we talked about the Model T earlier. Well, we didn't really talk about it, but in the Gilded Age, the Model T comes about. So we start to see cars leading to mobility, music, dances. As it says right here, dating. And this is big, right? The idea that people would go out for fun, not just to like court their um, future spouse, that kind of thing. And the advent of the radio. The radio comes along during this time period, like I mentioned in um, the earlier presentation. The radio is going to be sort of mass media, right? Where people now can get the news and entertainment and stuff like that. Women were called flappers because of their hairstyle and or clothes. Um, men often dressed. It says about men often dressed as Rudolph Valentino's chic character. This is a presentation I didn't put together, but I guess that was a thing in the 20s. This sort of like, yet again, more so emulating celebrities. That's the bigger thing to understand here. So it's not just the idea of this chic character thing that I guess was popular in the 20s. The older generation thought the young people, right, were reckless and lacked morals, right? This is kind of an interesting thing. When, yet again, the ideas of complex understanding, we think about these generations, right? This 20s generation, the 20s, 30s, um, they're going to be the generation, people born in the 20s are going to be the sort of parents of the baby boomers, right? All the people born in the 20s are going to be in their, you know, be in their 20s and 30s during the 40s, during World War II, and that greatest generation, right, is really going to be different than any other generation. Every generation, for the most part, is going to do what the 20s generation is doing. They're going to push the envelope, right? They're going to push society's standards and morals and all that sort of stuff. The greatest generation, right, the generation that fought World War II, is really going to be more traditional, and that's going to be sort of an outlier. And we'll look at that when we get there to it. So the lost generation is what this lost generation, or the kind of the writers and intellectuals of this time period, right? As it says right here, believed that new society was cold and materialistic, right, and impersonal. So like we talked about F. Scott Fitzgerald and The Great Gatsby, right? He um, revels in the shallowness of youth culture, right? And Gatsby, right, is always trying to find whatever's missing in him, that sort of thing. Um, Hemingway, right, is going to write a farewell to arms. It says right here about the generation's contempt for war and its desire to move on from it. Even though Hemingway is going to be a bit of a war junkie himself. Fitzgerald, right, the parties were bigger, the pace was faster, the shows were broader, the buildings were higher, the morals were looser, and the liquor was cheaper. And yet again, this is the 20s during Prohibition. So flappers and speakeasies. So flapper culture, right? Who are these young women, right? They were going to be young, independent women that had jobs and money for themselves, right? That they didn't have to rely upon the family or men or whatever. Why did people disagree with them? Because this was breaking away from the traditional, breaking away from the norm, right? Women going out like, say, Sex in the City style, right, wasn't something that was around during this time period. Well, I should say it started during this time period. Um, this is also where you start to see the advent of like dances, right? I can't think of any popular dances at the moment, but like the Charleston, right, was kind of what these folks are doing here. Um, but yet again, the idea of the short hair, the dress that goes to the knees, that kind of stuff. Also, this sort of elegant lifestyle. this modern woman, right? Frances Marion produced a movie called The Flapper, and other movies, Flapper, name and image. The young women in America and Europe adopted new looks and attitudes. Prohibition created a gray area between law-abiding citizens and those who had a disdain for authority. The work of writers such as F. Scott Fitzgerald helped popularize this new look for women. The notion of that gray area, right, is that it was exciting, right? We were breaking the law, but we weren't really like doing anything bad, that kind of idea. Flappers were different than their parents. They took jobs outside the home. They were provocative. They smoked cigarettes. They rode bicycles. They drove cars. They drank alcohol. They dated people, right? Which was different, which was uncommon for the period, as it says, and they flirted and went out all the time. Yet again, more flappers. This is that chic guy that I don't, I'm not sure how much they dressed like that, but this idea, right? The guy in the suit, people wouldn't go anywhere without a hat back in the day. Um, but they would have tried to emulate famous people. That was kind of more of a thing during this time period because of the advent of movies and radio and all that sort of stuff. We had jazz, right? Started in New Orleans with African rhythms. It says right there, followed the Mississippi into northern cities. So, your jazz places are going to be New Orleans, right? Not New Orleans, Memphis, New York, right? All these are going to be big hubs for jazz music. Both the black and white music lovers frequented nightclubs to hear Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, and others. There's old Duke Ellington, Armstrong. So the prohibition, right, during this time period, the 18th Amendment prohibited the manufacture and sale of alcohol, right? The Volstead Act was created to enforce prohibition, setting up, basically the federal government as a way to enforce it. There was too much, um, you know, uh, they were called scofflaws, people that didn't follow the law. There were too many people that didn't follow the law. So it says right here, there's a place in America during Prohibition, speakeasies, were a place where people would get together to drink. Oftentimes, these were in places that were away from the public eye. So famously, right, even though it recently closed, you had the 21 Club in New York City that had a sort of secret back room that people would hang out and drink in, right? And then if they'd get tipped off by people, and they'd run everybody out, and it was just hidden behind like a secret door, right? So nobody could tell who was back there drinking. But in reality, it was politicians, it was famous people, right? All that sort of stuff. Says inside these ordinary folks carried on with reckless abandon and rubbed shoulders with notorious gangsters like Al Capone and John Dillinger, right? The notion there, yet again, is that Capone and Dillinger made money off of bootlegging, which we talked about last time. Now, the interesting thing, yet again, pirates and smuggling ad here, is that Capone really made more money off of gambling and prostitution, and the drinking went along with it. So, like, you couldn't run a brothel or a casino without offering people a drink. So that was why they bootlegged, not necessarily because they made money selling the drinks. And that is an end to part two. I guess I could have squeezed it in, but hey, that's what we got.